Hello, this is Randy, and thank you for joining me once again for Brain Break with Randy. I want to give you a little bit of background so the story makes a little more sense. My father and uncles were all in World War II. My dad was a radar technician, first at naval bases. He was in the Navy, and then he installed radar on aircraft carriers and finally in planes. He never told us scary stories. He only told us funny stories. And my dad was not a big guy, especially at that age. He had run track and then was a manager of the track team in Gunnison, Utah, very small, cute little town. And he didn't weigh an awful lot. I remember putting on his uniform that he'd saved, and I was probably 14, and it was tight on me. And he laughed and said it wasn't tight on him when he was in the Navy, which he was over 20. Um, and I was a little taller, so the pants weren't quite long enough, and the shirt definitely wasn't long enough, or the blouse, whatever they called it. Anyway, so my dad was in the Navy, and my uncles were in the Army. I believe several of them were at D-Day. I may be wrong on that, but that's what I'm remembering. But they didn't want my dad to go in the Army. He was the little brother, and so he chose to go into the Navy. They figured he'd be safe. And luckily, he was in the Atlantic as opposed to the Pacific, so he probably was fairly safe. He spent a while of his time, over a year, out in Bermuda, and did the radar installation there. But the reason I bring this up is my family had a proud tradition of serving in the military. And I was in that group where the draft ended and before they had mandatory registration where we didn't register. In fact, I recall only one person going into the military from my graduating class, which was fairly large. And he was going to West Point. And later on, I found lots of my class members had gone on into the military, but I didn't know about it until later when Facebook came along. But years later, my son said he wanted to join the Army. And I said, well, go and talk to all of the recruiters, thinking I'd slow him down a little bit. And he had played football quite successfully in high school, but he hadn't kept his grades up, so no Division I school would touch him. And frankly, he was probably a little on the smaller side for Division I. And so he decided to join the military. He came back and said, I want to be a Marine. And I kind of, bowed my head, because if I were to have joined the military at his age, I would have wanted to be a Marine too. That impressed me an awful lot. And they did at that time for me. To make a long story short, he did end up joining the Marine Corps. He served 2 enlistments. He deployed 4 times and had just an amazing time in the military. But the whole time he was in the military, we continued to pray for all of our service members, and especially for our son and his squad or platoon. And one thing we started doing because of his service was to thank military veterans for their service. And one time I was in Tucson on a road trip for work, and I had just gotten some gas, and it was early evening, and had gone in to get a soda or something in Tucson, Arizona. And I believe I was spending the night there, but I came out and a gentleman walked past me wearing a Vietnam veteran's hat. And without thinking, I said to him, thank you for your service. And kept walking, and he turned around and he said, "What did you say to me?" And I turned around and I said, "Excuse me, sir, I was just thanking you for your service. You're wearing a Vietnam veteran hat, and I wanted to thank you for your service. My brother served in Vietnam as well as my uncle, and I appreciate your service. And I had some cousins that served there as well." And he walked closer to me, and his face got all tight, and I thought, I hope this guy's not going to hit me. And the next thing I know, he's hugging me. This is a guy older than I am, and I'm an old guy. Um, but this was several years ago, at least 15 years ago. And he was kind of sobbing on me. And I tapped him on the back and said, "Are you okay? Is there something I can do for you or help you?" And he said, "When I came back, we were called baby killers. We were spit upon. They threw things at us. And I don't ever remember being thanked for my service. Thank you. It was an honor to serve." And he walked on into the store after wiping his face and getting the tears out of his eyes. And I've continued to make it a habit to thank people that I see as veterans for their service. I am very grateful for it, even though I didn't serve. I am honored to know anyone that served, and I'm grateful for their efforts to keep my country free and to give us opportunities that we wouldn't have. I have lived in other places in the world, and I've traveled a little bit, and I am so very grateful for what we have in this country. So I encourage you to, next time you see a veteran, thank them for their service. I don't think you'll have the same response I had, but I've only had that one time, and I'm so glad I had that opportunity because he deserved to be thanked for his service. Everyone needs to be thanked for their sacrifice. When our son was deployed, it was a terrible sacrifice for our family. He saw an awful lot of action. He was in a recon group. He was a scout sniper. And it was a scary time. I had to tell him not to call his mother at night because what he'd do is he'd call me and he'd say, "Hey, Dad, listen, he's calling on a satellite phone." And I'd hear shots and, mortars or whatever kind of things were being fired at him. And he'd identify the weapon system that the enemy was using against them. And he said, "Gotta go." And then he'd go shoot again. And our son's kind of a character, but I told him not to call his mother anymore, that I would take those calls if he felt like he really needed to call. And of course, he never slowed down his calls. But our son is an adrenaline junkie, and he's been fun to have around. I love him. So again, thank you for watching Brain Break with Randy. I appreciate you, and I hope you will subscribe and like, and please tell your friends about us. We would like to keep making this kind of material for you. Have a great day. Bye now.